I'm sorry. Brian, we're doing roll call.
Okay.
And I can't hear you, but I see you signaling that you're present.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, he is here via Zoom, and Daniel Buxer.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Vanderwood. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. First, the January 10th, 2023 regular business meeting minutes. They were presented. What is the pleasure of the board?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the January 10th meeting.
The motion by Mr. Hemingway to approve as presented. Is there support for that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll approve.
Second by Ms. Mayor. Is there any question on the motion to approve? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Passes on a roll call, a voice vote. Next is the special meeting that took place on January 24th.
Mr. Chairman, I have a correction.
Ms. Mayor, please.
This would be the first item, the preliminary hearing, Matthew Bannock. The last paragraph doesn't seem quite right. Tom, I think you have a little help here. Mr. Bannock said that he plans to install a permeable driveway that will be planted with grass. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, it is correct. It's he was referring to a driveway that was that's interplanted with grass. It's like a it's kind of like these concrete rings that are planted
Okay.
or that are installed. There's grass.
And then the following sentence, though, he said the driveway will be used infrequently because the garage will be for storage. Is it? I thought it was going to be housing vehicles.
Yeah, storage of cars.
So, okay, all right, then I guess it's fine. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Mayor to approve as presented. Is there support for that motion?
Second.
By Mr. Hemingway. Any question on the motion to approve as presented? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries by votes of 4-0. Moving on to preliminary hearings, we have BZA docket 23-2 HP Munster Investment LLC seeking multiple variances, etc. at the Hyatt Place Hotel, 9420 Calumet. Mr. Underwood, would you please give us a summary?
Yes, I will. I'm going to scroll down here so you can see on the screen the proposal for the signs. As you stated, the applicant is HP Munster Investment LLC, which is the developer of the Hyatt Place Hotel at 9420 Calumet Avenue, which is located within the Maple Leaf Crossing planned unit development. The building is currently under construction. It's located directly behind the office building, which is also under construction, so it's at the northwest corner of the site. And the applicant has submitted a sign permit application, and we responded back with instructions to file for a variance in order to obtain permission to install the signs as proposed. So they're seeking approval of 8 variances related to the signage. I've put a rendering of the building up there. There are also spec sheets of the signs in your staff report. But this planned unit development is governed by the Maple Leaf Crossing development standards in all things. And in the case of signage, it says that signage will be compliant with the Munster zoning ordinance unless a variance is obtained from the Board of Zoning Appeals. So as I said, there are 8 variances being requested. The first is, well, there's a series of variances that all kind of refer to the same thing because they're proposing 3 channel letter signs, one on the south facade, which you can see here, one on the east facade that's facing Calumet Avenue. And then on the other side, no, it's the same side. They're also proposing a sign on the north facade, which is facing Maple Leaf Boulevard. Each of these signs are proposed to be installed on the 4th floor of the building. And each one of them is a channel letter style sign. So the variances are for the following: one, for the quantity, and in our standards, we only permit a sign on what we define as a facade, which is a building wall that faces a street or public way. So in this case, they would only be permitted a sign on the north side and the south side. The sign facing east would not be permitted because it's not facing a public way. We also permit signs only on the 1st floor if they're a wall sign. So all 3 of these signs are proposed for the 4th floor. So there's 3 variances required for those. There are also on the east side, again, even though the sign is not permitted, were it to be permitted, it exceeds the overall area permitted for a wall sign, which is 1.5 square feet of signage per linear foot of the elevation, building elevation. So they're proposing a 129.91 square foot wall sign. That's the sign shown here. And the maximum permitted area would have been 116 square feet. There are also 4 variances being requested with respect to the overall height of the sign. And this refers to the letter height. On a building with a setback of less than 100 feet from a public way, the maximum height of a wall sign letter is 24 inches. On the north and south elevations, they're proposing 33.75 inch tall letters. On the east side, they're proposing 40 inch tall logo. And finally, the overall sign height for a building with less than 100 feet from the road is 36 inches. So individual letters can be 24, overall sign can be 36. On the east side, they're proposing a sign with an overall height of 74.625 inches. So having said that, in the staff report, I did list ways that they could comply with the sign standards. And essentially what they would have to do would be eliminate the wall sign installed on the east side of the building, move the signs that are on the north and south sides down to the 1st story facade, or replace them with a different type of sign that's permitted in a higher location. And then thirdly, they have to reduce the overall height of the actual signs themselves. I've also provided some examples of other high places throughout the country that have what appear to be compliant signs with our standards. But in any case, this is a preliminary hearing, and you would be being asked to schedule a public hearing for next month.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwood. Before we proceed to the petitioner, does the board have any questions?
No.
No.
Mr. Speck, are you good?
I'm good.
I see the petitioner is present. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Amit Shah. I'm at 10057 Devon Street, Munster.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add that addition to what Mr. Vanderwood presented?
No, I don't. I mean, ideally, I'd like to get it approved as submitted. I'm open to your suggestions, but first option would be approval as submitted.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the petitioner at this point? Ms. Mayor.
Do you, or does your company own other Hyatt Place hotels?
Not Hyatt Place. No.
Do you own other hotels?
Yeah.
In the Munster area?
Miracle. We have 2 Miracle.
That's all I have.
Any other questions from the members of the board?
No.
Hearing or seeing none, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to set this for public hearing.
Is there support for that motion?
Second.
By Mr. Hemingway. The motion is to set for public hearing. Is there any question on that motion? Here there seeing none, Mr. Vanderwood, please call the roll.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Fred Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Daniel Buckler.
Yes. Shaw, you do have a public hearing. Please work with Mr. Vanderwood in the town to make sure all notice requirements are met and any other details, and we will see you next month.
Good evening, thank you.
Thank you. We proceed to our public hearings on the agenda. First one is BZA 2210, Community Foundation of Northwest Indiana, requesting approval of multiple variances from the Munster zoning ordinance, et cetera, at 7730 Treadway Drive. Before we proceed to the public hearing, Mr. Vanderwood, do you want to do a quick summary?
Yes, and again, I'm just gonna pull up something here on the screen here so we can all kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. The background on this petition is let me get my notes here. In June of 2022, so June of last year, you may recall there was an application submitted by the Community Foundation for a number of variances related to the development of an immediate care building at the subject property. At the time, it had a different address because it had not been subdivided, so it's now that it's subdivided, the address is 730 Treadway Drive. At that time, there were some sign variance requests also submitted. The Board of Zoning Appeals ended up approving nearly all of the site-related and building-related variances, but tabled the sign variances. So in the past few months, I was contacted by Community Foundation and they requested that the board rehear the petition for the sign variances. So I won't go through everything in the staff report, but as I said, there were 8 variances that were granted, 3 that were denied, and then there are now 12 additional variances being requested in connection with signage. I can go through each one if you'd like. Okay, but I'll just point out that there are variances requested both for the wall signs, including similar to the previous one, the location of the signs on non-street facing facades, or non-street facing elevations, I should say. Overall height and size signs, they're requesting variances from the sign materials for the building. And then they're also requesting an additional 5 variances for the monument sign, both for the overall size, the type of sign, the illumination of the sign, and for the lettering on the face of the sign. So similar to the previous application, what they would need to do if they were to comply with the Munster zoning code, they would have to eliminate the 6-foot, 4-inch tall logo signs installed on the 2nd floor, north, east, and west sides of the building, eliminate the large immediate care sign on the east side of the building, reduce the size of the immediate care sign on the rear of the building to 6 square feet, and eliminate the internal illumination, reduce the size of the monument sign to 18 square feet from 29 square feet, and reduce the height of all letters and logos to 12 inches. And then finally redesign the monument sign such that it was constructed with solid materials rather than a cabinet. I've also provided for reference some photographs, Google Street View of some other commercial buildings within that area. You notice that many of them have very little signage. And I would just remind the board that when you're reviewing variance requests, you are to consider the character of the surrounding developments, and also you're to consider the scale and scope of the variances being requested, and are instructed to grant really only the minimum variance necessary to relieve a particular difficulty or hardship.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwood. Members of the board, are there any questions for Mr. Vanderwood before we proceed? Mr. Speck?
No.
Before we proceed to the public hearing, council, will you please advise us if the proof of publications are in order?
I understand now.
Thank you, Mr. Okay.
Hey, Dan, just to clarify that, I did consult with Dave Westland on this with respect to the public notices, and it was his legal opinion that the notices that were sent out in June were sufficient to allow the public hearing to continue.
Wonderful, thank you. Petitioners, are you present?
Yes, sir.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Dave Body, 15014, West 153rd, Cedar Lake, Indiana.
Before we open the public hearing, do you have any comments that you want to address to the board, or?
I guess the big thing is this is an immediate care facility. We want to make sure that people coming in from all directions know that it's an immediate care facility. It's for healthcare. It's for the town. We're providing services to take care of people. A lot of the architectural features of the building were added to meet the town codes. So I think, you know, the 812 pitches on all the roof. So I don't think the signage is out of proportion at all with the size of the building. It is a 34,000 square foot building. I think it's all in proportion, and I think it looks very nice.
Thank you. Please go have a seat.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public, whether in person or on Zoom, who wish to address this petition and this petition only? BZA 22-10. Any members of the public?
I do have somebody on Zoom with their hand raised.
Please
I don't know if
recognize
that's
them. Mr. Riley.
related to this.
Is that me, Tom?
Yeah, Michael's
Yep.
iPhone, speak.
So Michael Gepfer, 10380 Oxford Place. I kind of, thanks to the board for allowing me to speak. I feel like I should just record this and play it back, I think a few more times in this meeting, and then basically almost every meeting that we all attend, because it's kind of the same thing over and over again. We have a fantastic signage ordinance in the town. It's great. The town is no longer, you know, Calumet Avenue is less and less becoming just a avenue of billboards, and it's fantastic. I really hope that we just continue to adhere to that signage ordinance that we have, because I think it's great. You know, we have some wonderful new buildings in town. They did adhere to the signage ordinance, and they're all packed. Like, everybody seems to be able to find them, even though their signs are within the ordinance. You know, we all, again, said this a million times, we all have phones now. We all, you know, use directions. I'm not looking for a building based on the sign anymore. I'm listening to, you know, Siri to tell me when to turn. We don't need a big billboard to get us there. We don't need a searchlight. We can all find our way to these buildings, no problem. Everybody's going to know what this building is and how to get there. So you know, we don't need a big advertisement for it off the Calumet Avenue. Again, great ordinance. Thanks for passing it. Hopefully we can stick to it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Are there any other members of the public, whether in person or on Zoom, who wish to address this petition? Mr. Vanderwood on Zoom.
Nope, I'm not seeing anyone else on Zoom.
And I see no one else in public, so I will close the public hearing. Coming back to the board members, do you have any questions for the petitioners? Do you want the petitioners to come back to the podium?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor, please.
I feel like we need to go through these signs.
Okay,
So, Mr. Oden,
So we want to go through sign by sign. We'll just go through elevation by elevation.
okay,
Okay, this is the north elevation of the building. So as you were heading south down Calumet Avenue, just the immediate care and the birdhouse. Okay, the south elevation, so coming down north on Calumet Avenue, just the immediate care sign. Do you want to flip so we can see east and west, please? So on the east elevation of the building, which would be facing Calumet Avenue, a birdhouse in the immediate care. And on the west elevation, just the birdhouse. The birdhouse, in relationship to the size of the building, it ends up fairly significant just to be seen. It's about 37 square feet by itself. And I think the last sign would be the monument sign, which, keep in mind, the monument sign's only a little bit over 6 foot tall, and it does sit 120 feet off of Calumet Avenue because we made that outlot. That's right along Calumet Avenue, or detention retention bond. I think very nice signage. It's attractive. I don't think it's all too much for the size of the building. Yeah, actually, it's very similar to our CDC building. The monument sign's about the same size. And I think on CDC, we have community care or community diagnostic center on a couple sides. It's fairly similar.
Ms. Mayor?
Any other questions, Sharon? Does it make sense?
well, it makes sense, but we've had a lot of issues, especially like with what's on the screen right now. What comes to mind is the doctor's office on the corner of Franklin and Columbia. And we never did come to an approved sign on that, correct, Tom?
Correct, yes.
That
Okay.
for 9/11, 9/11 through 9/31,
Yes.
that one's coming pretty soon.
And is it going to comply?
We'll do our best, yes.
Okay, so then you could comply here.
Well, I don't know how much, when you think of it's 120 feet off of Calumet Avenue, you want to make sure that people can at least see it when they're driving by. You know,
So let's go back to the wall signs. Because we just had the preliminary hearing on the hotel. And, so of course that building is much taller, right? So I can see that,
that building a 5-story,
4-story.
4-story. So, when you think of the side, the roof added onto that, that only had a flat roof structure. So this is about the same as a 3-story building.
So what's the height on those letters?
20 inches, 1'8" and 5/8".
And that's the same for both elevations?
Yes.
So the issue there, Tom, is the height of the letters?
I'm looking at my report here. No, there's no problem with the size of those letters. The problem is, or not the problem, but the lack of code compliance is with respect to the logo signs, which are 6 feet tall, or 76 inches rather.
What Dave's calling the birdhouse?
The birdhouse.
Birdhouse logo is significantly larger than what would be permitted, 76 inches tall. And the location, the signs are to be installed on the first story rather than the second story. That's the issue with the lettering,
Is where it's located, and it's up too high?
correct? It's too high and, yeah, the logos are too large.
Keep in mind, when we went to meet all the ordinances with the landscaping, we put 84 trees around this building.
What's the height of the bird's nest that's on the Calumet Avenue side of the hospital?
The one that's up on the 7th floor, it's over 11 feet tall.
I'm just trying to put that into perspective.
So that's half as tall as that.
So those channel letters, if you did them, then you could put them on the eyebrow there above the doors, could you not?
So just to clarify, on the north facade, or the north elevation, which is the street facing elevation, the immediate care sign needs to be at the first floor.
Right, that's what I was saying, to lower it.
With the south elevation, okay, which is the rear of the building, the back of the building, they're only permitted a 6 square foot sign. Because it's the rear of the building, it doesn't face a street.
Okay,
So just the intent of our sign ordinance is not that a building within a block, okay, not on a corner, would be visible from all sides, or it would have signage on all sides so that its name would be glowing on all sides. So that the person or the building behind it would have a street size sign facing it.
Right.
Or the building to the side.
so in that case, the sign that's on the north side of the building is facing the dialysis center,
Yes.
and there's
It's
no
facing the
street?
It's on the north side, it's facing Treadway Drive.
That's
Which
So it is
the
the street side.
correct. And the south side is facing their parking lot and the property to the south.
So in code, what's acceptable in our code is that they have the larger size sign on Treadway and not facing the parking lot?
Correct. The sign facing the street is permitted to be large, to be the normal standard. Any sign on the back of a building is to be smaller. And the thought behind that is that if you're in the parking lot, all you need is a sign directing you to the door. You don't need a large sign identifying the building on the street, so to speak.
Is the monument sign placed at the entry to the parking lot?
Monument sign is located at the northeast corner of the lot.
So then if
On
you're
Treadway Drive.
approaching to go into the parking lot, is there a sign that you're going to see that tells you you're in the right place?
Yeah, you'll see the sign on the north face of the building and the monument sign. Yes.
They just need to be smaller.
The monument sign needs to be smaller and the sign on the back of the building needs to be smaller. And the logos need to be smaller.
Gotcha. Get all that thing?
I do, but I don't. There'll be the point where they won't look in proportion with the building.
Is there any further questions?
Mm.
Mr. Speck, any questions?
Yes, I have one. It says that we, on the eliminate the 6'4" tall logo signs. No, that's not the one I'm talking about. The monument sign. How tall? Because it's like 6'4", whatever. What's the allowed size of that we would normally without it being?
The permitted height is 6 feet. The permitted area is 18 square feet.
Okay,
It'd only be 3 foot, 3 foot by 6 foot.
If it were 6 feet tall, yeah.
About that. Big double the width, it's very narrow.
okay.
Well, if you take that sign and try to shrink it down to 18 square feet, it might look weird, but you might be able to design one a little differently to meet the ordinance.
Mr. Speck, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Is there a motion from the board?
Before we go into motion, I am wondering if Dave wants to go back to the drawing board and maybe look at reducing the size of these signs before it gets denied.
Doesn't sound like we have much choice. Is that? I guess I'd like it approved as is.
Well, I know that, I won't approve the monument sign. And there's, I think, hesitation on some of our parts on the size of the other signs. But I can't speak for anybody else.
Sir, you have the option of having the board go through its vote and whatever the outcome might be. Or if you wish, we could continue your petition. You could try to rework it to meet the town standards, which may or may not meet code, and you may or may not have fewer variants requested.
Would there be any more comments on the signage on the building?
As far as what
would be
more
appropriate? Or what would be your recommendations?
Well, for me, it would be to conform to the surrounding environment, the other buildings on that Calumet Avenue corridor there. Speaking just for myself.
So,
Can I speak for 1 second?
Please.
Sean O'Brien, Legacy Sign Group. I happen to do most of those signs in that corridor. So when you say to be more in line with the signs in that corridor, I'm kind of curious because most of the signs are much larger than what these signs are. For example, Community Diagnostic and the Cardiology Associates, those signs are 32-inch tall by 30 feet and 45 feet long. The address letters on Fountain View are 3 feet tall. The monument sign there at Fountain View is 10 foot tall by 10 foot wide. Every monument sign in that whole area is larger than what this sign is, and the same construction.
Mr. Underwood, did they exist before the change in winds?
Yes.
But we did receive some variances along the way for some of those, actually all those signs were variances that were received on them. Fitness Point obviously is very large signs. There's another monument sign that's at the corner there in actual Fitness Points, which is.
right, but when you take the totality, all of those signs on anyone, you're citing individual buildings that have a sign.
Well, I'm
But
speaking to
we're
the
looking at
corridor.
multiple sides of one building.
Well, the Community Diagnostic Building has 3 signs on the west side and 3 signs on the east side.
So but the signs that you're speaking of were all before we adopted the new code,
All those buildings were built before you adopted the new code.
right?
And I think the other thing with all these buildings is there's more than one front, because you basically think all the way around the buildings, and there's roads on all sides, which is basically what you have on this building, is you're gonna see it from multiple directions. I mean, it's on 6 acres, it's easy to see.
Right.
And people will be coming from all different directions. That's why we want to make sure that they get the health care they need.
But again, as the remonstrator stated, people will not generally be driving up and down Calumet Avenue looking for a building that says
Well, but if they are looking for immediate care, they're also in a stressful situation where they're not gonna be on their phones, trying to find somewhere because their kid got hurt and needs stitches or whatever reason they need to go to immediate care. I driving around tonight, there's a sign for an orthopedic place on Kyman Avenue. I couldn't even tell you what the name of it is because you can't see it because it's not, it's a conforming sign, but it doesn't have any lights on it. It didn't, you can't even tell what it even is. And that has a community outpatient place there in the bottom that's not lit up because it conforms and you can't read it either. And there's a point that the monument sign, the only part that is illuminating is just the copy, as in many other community monument signs along Kyman Avenue. Only that copy light up. It's not obtrusive, the big white light, big white backgrounds with letters on them. These are very classy signs, well done, minimal lighting coming out of them. If we put channel letters on something, the only thing that does is makes the letters stick out real far, and I think it looks worse than what we're presenting here.
I appreciate your perspective. We're not here to debate the
Right.
zoning code at this point, but Ms. Mayor made a suggestion. Are you willing to entertain continuance?
We can do that. If we bring back signs within that corridor from Calumet to Sheffield in those buildings that match that type signage on the similar buildings.
Well, but Dave, what you have to understand is that we adopted a new code for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So we want to stay as close to that as we can, and obviously it can't always be done, but that's the goal. So to go back and highlight things that were done 10 years ago isn't going to help this.
No. Yeah, we'll do our best to conform. We'll be back next month.
Is there a motion to continue the petition?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to continue.
Is there support for the motion to continue to the next month?
I'll second.
Mr. Hemingway's made a second to the motion to continue. Is there any question on the motion to continue this petition till next regular meeting? Here, seeing none, Mr. Vanderwood, please take roll.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Brad Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Dan Buckner.
Yes, the motion to continue passes. And gentlemen, we will see you next week, next month. Next item on the agenda, Legacy Sign Group on behalf of Luke Oil requesting sign variance from the table, et cetera, at 750 Broadmoor.
So I received correspondence yesterday that they were withdrawing their petition.
Do we need to take any official action at this point?
I don't think so.
Okay, let me make a note.
They didn't ask that it be deferred, Tom. They asked that it be removed from the agenda.
So if they came back and they had a variance request, they'd have to start from the beginning, is that correct? Next item on the agenda is Munster Properties LLC requesting a variance for table, et cetera, reduced parking spaces at 10350 Calumet. Mr. Vanderwood.
Thank you. This was heard in a public hearing last month, so I'm going to just cut to the chase on it. At the previous public hearing, the board had asked the applicant to review their site plan and see if they could reduce the number of parking spaces that for which they were asking a variance. So increase the overall number of parking spaces on site. You'll recall that this is a medical office redevelopment of the former Calumet Harley-Davidson at 10350 Calumet. Initially, plans were presented to the board that were asking to reduce the required number of parking spaces by 41. And they have since revised their plans after the project was tabled. So they've been able to increase, based on the plans that I've been given and that are in your staff report, they were able to increase the total number of spaces on site by 24. So a total of 156 spaces are being provided. The required number for our ordinance is 173. On the screen here, you can see these are the areas that they've proposed to modify in order to increase that parking. On the left here, they're proposing to add some parallel spaces, additional 90-degree spaces here, and then they're proposing to remove some of these landscape islands, what we call them, within the parking lot, and convert those into parking spaces. So let me see if I can scroll down and show the current site plan that's being proposed. Sorry, this keyboard is not the best for navigating all the time. So this is the site plan that was that is currently proposed. As I said, you'll see that they've added parking spaces along the west edge. They've added some spaces within the lot where there were previously landscaped islands, and then in this area here, they've reduced the amount of landscaping so that they can fit 2 rows of parking spaces. That's really the sum and substance of the revisions. My, I guess my staff recommendation is that, given that they had sort of testified that their operations didn't require those spaces, my recommendation would still be to approve the variance that was initially presented. I don't know if that's what they're going to ask for necessarily, but my suggestion is that those areas that they've identified on the site could potentially be held in reserve if there was ever a true parking shortage on the site in the future. But that being said, they are here to present the applicant is here to present their request, and depending on the outcome tonight, they're also seeking approval of their development plan from the Plan Commission later today, so that'll affect the site plan that ultimately gets presented to that.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwood. Are there questions for Mr. Vanderwood from the board?
I have a question.
Mr. Mayor, please.
Tom, with the changes that they're showing on here, reducing the islands and the effects to the landscaping, are they still in a compliance with the landscaping code?
I would say no and yes. And the reason I say no is because no, they're not complying with all the requirements of the landscaping ordinance, but the landscaping ordinance or the landscaping section of the ordinance allows for, in the case of a redevelopment like this, minimizing the amount of landscaping in order to achieve the required number of parking spaces. So they're only subject to the landscaping ordinance to the extent that they can do so without eliminating any necessary parking spaces, if that makes sense. So if if our code calls for them to have an island somewhere, but they need that area for a parking space, parking trumps landscaping.
So, but even with this redesign, they're still roughly 20 spaces short of our code.
That is, yeah, so they're required to have 173 and they have 156.
One more question. The building that we were just speaking of in the previous petition for community of immediate care is roughly the same size building as this. And I didn't see when we were going over the petition for the previous items that were requested and approved parking. So is that building in compliance with parking?
Yes.
So they have, whatever it is, 170 or more parking spaces for 30,000 square foot building, that's full use.
That's correct. They did not ask for or receive a parking variance.
Okay, very good. That's all I had.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from Mr. Vanderwood? Mr. Woodland, do we need to reopen the? At this point, I will ask if there are any members of the public who wish to comment on this agenda item and this agenda item only. Anybody in person? Anybody on Zoom?
I'm not seeing people on Zoom.
Last call, anybody in the public? Person? Hearing or seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And at this point, petitioners are present. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, good evening. My name is Laura Costine. My address is 8401 Somerset Prairie Village, Kansas. I'm representing Gassner Walker Architects out of Kansas City, Missouri. We're the design architect for the client of this project. So I wanted to share a little bit of what Tom went over in terms of going back and taking a closer look at the question of, did we max out every potential parking spot available? So what was mentioned in the last project, the one that is meeting their count, it sounded like they had 6 acres. We have 3.77 acres. So our site is a bit smaller. A lot of the infrastructure in terms of drive lanes, existing parking, where our building location is set. So for us trying to max out every potential we have, what we have submitted on January 27th was what we believe the most that we can fit. And so just to kind of walk through those numbers, because leaving the January 24th meeting, it definitely was a question of, okay, can we do better? Where can we do better? Where can we find more spots? And so there was a project brought up at that January 24th meeting of a building of similar size that had a requirement of 190 spots that was allowed a variance of 150. And it sounded like in reality, that lot gets full and there's like the perception that there isn't enough parking. So one thing that we wanted to look at was a sense of parking intensity. So just to kind of look at the numbers, the 150 out of 190 in the previously approved variance that we were compared to, they're basically providing 78% of what's required by the variance or by the zoning ordinance. Our original BZA application, it looked like we were providing 76%. So we were performing even a little bit lower. So what we provided on January 27th with, and I think it was listed incorrectly, it's 157 spots. We were able to get, and I may have typed that wrong. We were able to get close to 90% of what's being asked by the zoning ordinance. So it seemed like that was a pretty big lift. And we did that in several different locations, like what Tom went through, adding to the north of the site, adding the parallel to the west, and then double loading the portion to the southwest to get to our 157. And as noted, one thing that we did do was remove 7 of the landscaped island spots to add to our stall count. One thing since then that we've looked at as our civil engineer has completed stormwater calculations is it looks like she was able to add another 4 at the north. So if we look at a maximum parking scenario, that would be roughly 161 spots, which would be 93% of what's being asked by the zoning ordinance. So again, a little bit closer, but that is sacrificing the landscaped islands. So if those were to be retained, so that we're satisfying as much of landscape as required, with those 4 added at the north, that would still keep us right at around 90%, 89 to 90% of this zoning ordinance being satisfied. So it seems like there is a way to give as much as possible to landscape and still give as much as possible to parking, knowing that we feel like we've reached the maximum of what we can on our site.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board of petitioner?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say your name again?
Oh, Laura.
Please come on back to
Oh,
you.
yep, okay, I thought it was done.
Well, thank you, Laura, for doing that work and going back to the drawing board. I greatly appreciate that. So the number of spaces that were that were gained from islands, what, can you tell us what that number is? 7. So if the islands were to remain islands and you were able to pick up those other 4 spots, what was the total number that you would have at that point?
I think it's 154.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Speck,
No, I'm good.
what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to slightly amend this to have the islands remain landscaped, pick up those additional 4 spaces that Laura was speaking of for a net of 154 spaces total.
And Ms. Mayor, do you also want there to be any reserved parking?
I don't think that there's a need for that.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Ms. Mayor to approve as amended. Is there support for her motion?
I'll
Yeah.
second.
Mr. Speck will make the second. Question on the motion to approve as amended. Mr. Redwood, do you have the exact wording of Ms. Mayor's?
I do, it's being recorded.
Great. Any further question on the motion? Hearing or seeing none, Mr. Redwood, please call the roll.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Brad Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Daniel Buxa.
Yes, the variance is approved. And so please work with Mr. Redwood on any further details. And our last public hearing this evening is BZA 23 number 1, Matthew Bannock, requesting approval, et cetera, for garage addition at 8737 Crestwood. Please petition, Mr. Bannock, why don't you go ahead and give us your summary?
Sure. The applicant here is seeking a variance from table 26 table 26-6.405.A-2 to permit a garage addition as residential property at 8737 Crestwood Avenue. The subject property currently has a 2-car attached garage and a 1-car detached garage. Our standards permit up to 4-car garage, either attached or detached, for a residence that's 5,000 square feet or less. This particular house meets that criteria. It doesn't exceed 5,000 square feet, and therefore they're limited to 4 cars total on site. The proposal is to add, as I said, they're permitted a 3-car garage maximum because it's less than 5,000 square feet. So with the addition of the detached garage, they would have a total of 5 garage spaces. So they exceed our standard by 2 spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderwood. Questions of Mr. Vanderwood? This is a public hearing. Before we proceed to the public hearing, Mr. Woodland, we push publication in order.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address this petition and this petition only? Mr. Vanderwood, anyone on Zoom?
See no one.
Anybody in person? Once, twice, 3 times. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Are the petitioners here? Please state your name and address for the record.
So Matt Bannock, 8737 Crestwood Avenue, Munster, Indiana. I have nothing else to add, I guess. I'm looking for it to be approved as is. The one thing I would say is, I get square footage, it's 5 cars, but the way it's laid out is 4, whatever that's worth.
Thank you. Questions of petitioner from the board? Mr. Speck,
No, I'm good.
hearing or seeing no questions, what is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance on the additional garage
There's
space.
been a motion by Mr. Speck to approve the variance request. Is there support for that motion?
Second that motion.
There's been a second by Mr. Hemingway. Is there any question on the motion to approve the petition? Is there? Hearing or seeing none, Mr. Vanderwood, please call roll.
Sharon Mayer,
No,
Brad Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
and Daniel Buxton.
I will also vote yes. Mr. Raddick, your variance has been requested. Please work with the town for any additional details.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to our findings of fact, BZA 22-13. Has the board had an opportunity to review that findings of fact? What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve.
Been a motion by Ms. Mayor to approve. Is there support for that motion?
I'll second.
Hemingway, any question on the motion? Hearing or seeing none, Mr. Vanderwood, please call the roll.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Brad Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Daniel Buxton.
Yes. Findings of fact are approved. Next, BZA 2215. Approving findings of fact for commercial building at 8130, 8138 Calumet Avenue. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Bucks, I'd like to make a motion to approve the finding of facts.
The motion to approve by Mr. Hemingway. Is there support for that motion?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Mayer. Any question on the motion? Here, seeing none, Mr. Vanderwood, please.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Brad Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Daniel Buxton.
Yes. The findings of fact are approved. And then finally, BZA 22-17, wholesale properties variance for parking spaces at 8250 Coleman Avenue. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Bucks, I'd like to make a motion to approve 2207 finding of facts.
There's been a motion to approve by Mr. Hemingway. Is there support?
I'll second.
There's a second by Mr. Speck. Any question on the motion? Here, seeing none, Mr. Vanderwood, please.
Sharon Mayer,
Yes.
Brad Hemingway,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Daniel Buxton.
Yes, findings of fact are approved. Are there any additional items for discussion? Mr. Speck?
No.
All right, our next regular business meeting is March 14th, 2023. I will entertain one final motion
Motion to adjourn?
by Ms. Mayer. Is there support?
Second.
By Mr. Hemingway. Any question on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned at exactly 7:45. Thank you, everyone, for your time and participation in this meeting today. We are adjourned.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Today is February 14th, and it is 7:49 p.m. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
roll call.
Yes, Counselor Kulturitis.
Present.
Counselor Tulowitzki.
Present.
Brian Specht,
Here.
Ms. Mills, and Rachel Brannigan.
Present.
I'll note that Counselor Mellon, Bill Baker, and Roland Rathman are all absent with notice.
So we've decided to postpone the election of officers to the next item on the agenda. Do we need to approve that?
We need a motion to vote to postpone the election of officers.
I suppose that.
I move we defer the election of officers. I'll second.
Okay, next on the agenda is
Vote, just all in favor.
all in favor.
Aye.
So next on the agenda is the approval of minutes from January 10th.
I move we approve the minutes as given. I'll second.
Next on the, I'm sorry,
Any
all
discussion?
any discussion?
No.
Oh, okay, let's call for a vote. All in
Okay,
favor?
I'll do a roll call.
Okay.
Okay. Counselor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Counselor Tulowitzki,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Rachel Brannigan.
Yes. For the crowd, this is my first time at this meeting, so please bear with me.
Unexpected.
Yeah, unexpectedly, yes.
Valentine's.
I'm also new to the planning commission, fairly new, so, all right, thank you. Thank you. Next, preliminary hearing for PC docket 23-001. Tom, do you take over from this point, or?
Yes, I can provide a summary of the application here. To pull up the site plan. This reference. Community Foundation of Northwest Indiana is requesting a rezoning of the property at 800 MacArthur Boulevard, shown here on the site plan, to a planned unit development in order to permit the addition of 2 stories of parking and a heliport deck on their existing 3-story parking garage. So this is a property that's owned by the Community Foundation of Northwest Indiana. As you can see on this site plan, there's an existing parking garage directly south of the hospital that's connected to the hospital via what they call in Minneapolis a skyway. And they are requesting, the property is currently zoned CV4 which limits the height of structures, principal structures and accessory structures to 50 feet or 4 stories. What they're proposing to do, as I said, is add 2 floors and a heliport deck to this existing garage. That would increase the height of the parking garage to approximately 70 feet tall and 5 stories, plus the raised helipad. In addition, the CD4A district also permits only 1 principal structure on a single lot. As you can see here, there is both the parking garage as well as a medical office building, which is along Calumet Avenue. We're going to pull up a different image to maybe show that a little better. There's no good way to zoom in. But, yeah, so you can kind of see here, this is the property in question. This is Calumet Avenue. This is Community Hospital. This is MacArthur Boulevard, which is a private road that connects Calumet Avenue on the west to Columbia Avenue on the east. And this is the subject property highlighted in blue. The parking garage is located here, accessed both from MacArthur Boulevard as well as a drive aisle here on the south side of it, and you drive out through here on the east side. And then this is that existing medical office building. I'll give you a little bit of zoning history. So as I said, they're requesting that this be zoned to a planned unit development. It's currently zoned CV4A. It's sort of an odd and unusual zoning history. We did some research when this petition came in, but in 1973, this entire area between Columbia and Calumet Avenue was zoned as a planned unit development. And then there were a series of amendments to that PUD for as each one of these lots was developed. So that continued on through actually through the year 2000 when this existing parking garage was constructed. That was the most recent planned unit development amendment. At the time, it was approved as a 3-story parking garage. So sometime between then and 2015 or 20, I think it was, yeah, I'm not really sure actually. Our records are kind of murky as far as what happened, but at some point it appeared in our official zoning maps as no longer planned unit development, but as a C2 zoning. So when the town adopted a new zoning map in 2019, all the C2 zoning districts became CV4A or CV4B. So that's why it carries that zoning designation now. Property to the north, which is the community hospital, is known as a planned unit development. So what the community foundation is requesting is to rezone this property as its own planned unit development, and it would be basically adjacent to the hospital campus to the north. As with any zoning application, really what you're looking at is what does the comprehensive plan say about it? What are the current conditions, character of structures in that district and adjacent to it? Is it a desirable use of the property? And will it conserve property values in the area? So that being said, I think just kind of from a staff perspective, the sort of unique zoning history as well as kind of unique location directly adjacent to the community hospital lends this property to be rezoned as a planned unit development. As I said, they can't really develop it as they're proposing under the current zoning because it does exceed the overall height and the overall number of buildings permitted on a single lot. So again, that sort of lends itself to incorporating it into the community hospital planning and development. That's the petition. This is the proposal for the parking garage addition. As you can see, it's, and I'll let the applicant speak a little bit more to it, but from the staff perspective, it's basically just the existing building with additional floors that look exactly the same. We had a site plan review committee meeting with Dave Body, and there were no comments from the staff, from engineering, fire, police, or planning that would have suggested any changes to what they're proposing here. So the staff recommendation is ultimately for approval. This is a preliminary hearing, so we would be seeking a public hearing next month and then a recommendation to the town council following.
So you just need a motion to schedule this for public hearing.
Correct.
So we really don't need to speak to them tonight.
Unless you have any questions for
In regards to this building, I do not. Do you have any questions for him?
I don't know, it's probably just a question for you, Tom. So as I understand it, it's trying to incorporate the parking garage into the existing PUD for the hospital to the north.
Well, it would be a separate plan unit development, but as far as sort of the overall zoning consistency within the area, it would essentially become
restriction or, yeah. well, Is there an issue with the existing PUDs?
I'm not aware of any, I've never received any complaints from anyone about the hospital being too tall, but this would match the house, the height of the
Match
hospital.
the height of the hospital, there's no residences really around that.
No, I think I mentioned in my staff report that this building is set back approximately 425 feet from Columbia Avenue. So the nearest residence would be another probably 100 feet beyond that. So when you're talking about questions of height, you're looking at, is this going to block out the sun from somebody's property or something like that? That's not going to be the case.
And just out of curiosity, what's driving the demand for the additional parking space?
I guess, come on up.
Thank you. So let me state my name, Dave Oddie, I'm with Community Foundation. Our business has increased immensely with other hospitals closing in the area. Our ED a year ago saw like 55,000 visits. This year it saw almost like 63,000 visits. So in order to accommodate all these additional people coming in, we have to increase the parking garage, provide for our staffing and the additional people on campus.
What is the reason for the helicopter pad at this? Is it currently on the?
It is,
community
it's
hospital?
currently on the fourth floor, so basically it's just going up in
Oh, it's
elevation.
currently on the parking.
It is, it's currently
Oh,
on the top floor, so, yeah, you probably won't even notice the addition when you see, you just, it's just a couple floors added.
Yeah.
It picks up 343 parking spaces, so it's a huge expense, but it's needed at this time.
Okay,
Thank you.
Should we make a motion then to pass this on to public hearing?
I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for PC docket number 23-001.
Second.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Take a vote.
So let's take a vote.
Okay, Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki,
Yes.
Brian Specht,
Yes.
Rachel Brannigan.
Yes. Moving on to public hearing for PC docket 22-025. Munster Properties LLC requesting approval of a development plan for a medical office building at 10350 Calumet Avenue.
Thank you. This project is a proposed redevelopment of the former Calumet Harley Davidson. Just trying to find the best site plan here. At 10350 Calumet Avenue. You may recall that the applicant here has sought and received a variance for parking. Here for me to show you all, but let's go back to the location. So this is the subject property. The applicant intends to, as I said, redevelop this property as from a kind of a light industrial use, motorcycle sales and repair into a medical office. So what they're planning on doing is completely remodeling the interior of the facility, expanding the parking lot to the north to accommodate the additional parking needed for this use, install some additional landscaping, some new parking lot lighting, as well as a new stormwater detention area along the north side of the property. As I mentioned, the applicant has received a variance from the parking standards, so they do have a site plan. I'm not sure if the site plan shown here corresponds completely with the plan that was approved by the plan commission. I'm sorry, by the Board of Zoning Appeals. But in any case, they are meeting our standards for landscaping internal to the parking lot and they're meeting standards for parking, given that they've received a variance. Let's see if I can find a good image here. Thought there was like an illustrative site plan. This is probably the best one here. This will kind of give you an illustration of what they're proposing to do here. The footprint of the building essentially stays the same. There's some modification to the parking lot. There's additional parking spaces being added here, and then additional spaces being added to the north. In this image, north is to your left, and then the retention pond is being installed up here. You can see that they're adding landscaping throughout the, around the parking lot and also within it. From a development plan perspective, there's not a ton of things to review because it's an existing building. I'll just kind of run through the standards that apply and give you a brief overview of how and if those standards are met. Permitted building materials in this district are brick, natural stone, cast stone, wood or metal shop front, etc. The only modifications that they're making to the building are there are some garage doors on the front of the building. Those are being replaced with storefront windows that meet our standards. There's some existing metal siding on the south and west, north facades. That's being cleaned up and painted. And then there is a section of metal siding at the southeast corner that will be replaced with new metal paneling. I'm going to give you a brief summary. The architect is here. She can describe it in a little more detail if you have any questions. But in any case, those standards are met. They are proposing a new dumpster enclosure at the southwest corner of their property. And talk a little bit about landscaping. There are a few things that are required for the landscaping plan that are not shown here. One is what we call an enhanced hedge along the Calumet Avenue frontage, because there's parking in what we call the first lot layer, which is like the front yard. This area has to be screened by an ornamental fence, continuous hedgerow, and the trees planted at 30-foot intervals. They are showing the hedge, but not the fence or the trees. A hedge screen is required along the north edge of the property to screen the parking lot from the adjacent property to the north. And then parkway trees are required along Calumet Avenue, planted 30 feet on center. In terms of pedestrian access, they are providing a new connection here to the sidewalk. They're also straightening out this non-EDA compliant curb ramp at their driveway. They're adding, as I mentioned, some new parking lot lighting. The photometric plan appears to comply with our standards, but they are proposing standard parking lot fixtures, and we require ornamental fixtures, so that would be something that would have to be revised on the plans. And I'll just note again that they are providing, because they're increasing the overall impervious surface on site with the additional parking spaces, they're providing detention along that north edge to capture any additional stormwater runoff. That's a summary of what they're proposing to do. As I mentioned, the applicant is here. The staff recommendation in this would be to approve, subject to the conditions which I mentioned above, those revisions to the landscaping plan and the revision to the lighting plan.
Tom, point out where the garbage is at. It's where the garbage on that picture there. Do you have up there? Well, let's take a look here. Lower left corner. Is that where it's at? Is that the northwest corner? Yeah. Okay, so that's located here. I think I misspoke. It's the southwest corner. That's gonna be big enough for 3 businesses that are gonna go there.
Well, that's just, says the applicant.
Okay. Maybe we research that, that's fine.
No, I mean, I don't know how frequent the garbage truck is, how frequent the garbage truck will be.
Well, I don't know what businesses are going there, so. Actually, so.
Should we open it up to the access? District? Please come up and state your name.
Hi, my name is Laura Pastine, 8401 Somerset, Prairie Village, Kansas. I'm representing Gastier Walker Architects from Kansas City, Missouri. And I think as part of our application, we also had some illustrative 3D views. I don't know if they're included in here. Those are kind of helpful to see the existing building as well.
So many. Yeah, there we go.
So we included photos of the existing building, give a bit of a flavor. So there's a lot of brick facing the east. That brick, so east is facing Calumet, it returns to the north and the south a bit. All of that brick is to remain. There is some repair work to be done. There's some roof and parapet repair to be done. There's a little bit of staining from water infiltration. So part of the envelope work is just repair. But all of the brick would remain, the barrel that you see there at the top would remain. Right now, there's a translucent cow wall glazing system that would be removed. But the openings would stay. We put vision glass in there, so it'll bring natural daylight to the interior of the space. All of the overhead doors are, as Tom mentioned, are to be replaced with clear vision glass storefront framing. We did bring some materials and samples if you guys wanted to get a sense of color. Where we're putting in new storefront, everything is going in a dark bronze. So we're updating a bit of the aesthetic. Right now, everything is very galvanized, kind of clear anodized. And so where we're putting in new material, it will be going in as the dark bronze. So that would be all of the storefront framing. All of the entry doors would be replaced as well. And we can keep going through here real quick. So, so just gives you a sense of our existing, again, this is the east face facing Calumet. This is our main primary facade. Right now we have that corrugated metal panel beyond that makes up most of the west wing of the building. That metal panel is in really poor condition. We have a lot of rust. There's exposed fasteners, so we have a lot of stuff to fix there. Because our main entrance into the development is in that far kind of angled corner. That is where we would be suggesting new metal panel to replace what's there. Everywhere else, we would just be on the back side, so it's the back of the house. So the west and the north would be painted, so we'd be repairing and painting. But at the kind of front entry, we would be proposing a new panel. So we're proposing something that's kind of like a fluted panel with a concealed fastener system. So it'll perform better, long lasting. The finish on it would be dark bronze to match the storefront system, so everything would be consistent. And I'm going to pass this up. We have kind of a pallet board plus the manufacturer's image of the dark bronze and that fluted panel. So the paint, lighter color would be what the metal panel is painted towards the west facade. So that would be the repair scope of work. And the only place on the building where we're changing the actual envelope material is, go to the next slide, the south elevation. So this is kind of like our rendering of that east side with that darker panel. So on the south elevation, again, that angled entry corner is where we'll be putting a new canopy that would cover the passenger side of a drop-off. So there'd be a larger canopy that comes out. It would be of a height that would allow an emergency vehicle to clear underneath. So a 13.6 clearance underneath that. Right now, we can see that that door only takes up a portion of that angled wall. So the only change to the envelope itself is we're showing that now as storefront glass across that whole width of just that angled wall portion. So that entry would be all glass. And the only portion of the building that would have the new darker fluted panel would just be this southwest corner. And so this rendering does show all of the new landscape improvements that are part of what was in our BZA application as well. And that's with the new canopies.
So what are the three tenant uses?
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry, yes. So, so if we're looking in plan at the northwest corner is a surgery center. The main bulk of the building to the east is an orthopedic clinic that has a physical therapy component. And then for right now, we're building it out as a white box, but the third tenant should come on pretty quickly, and that would be an imaging center at the southwest corner. So not every tenant will have the same type of intensity in terms of how many clients and patients at the same time, things like that. So in terms of trash, the trash enclosure is sized for 3 dumpsters right now. So it definitely is providing enough capacity for all tenants to have their own waste stream in that same enclosure.
Questions from the board?
It'll be a significant improvement. As sad as many residents are to lose the previous use.
Or the Trader Joe's help. So many people want the Trader Joe's.
Still one place.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice looking building, and it's clearly done lots of good planning to be considerate of the neighborhood. You're aware that there's train station, but there's a lot going to happen in that area in the coming years. So great diligence, but no questions.
So should we make a motion to approve?
This is public hearing, so I open it to the public first.
Okay. Let's open it up to the public.
I'm not seeing anyone else.
No one online. Okay. So the public hearing is closed. And now we make a motion to.
Yes.
I have some internet issues. Can you
I have
pull up
too,
the
yeah.
motions? Sure. I did read the conditions, and they seem reasonable. This seems reasonable to be.
Rotate this.
We approve docket, PC docket 22-025, granting approval of the developmental plan for the mental office building at 10-350 Calumet Avenue on the following conditions. Landscaping plan will be revised to include an enhanced hedge along Calumet Avenue frontage, which includes 3.5 feet ornamental fence, a continuous hedge, and trees planted 30 inches, 30 foot on center. Thank you. The hedge screen along the north edge of the property, screening the parking area from the adjacent property. Park tree planted 30 feet on center along Calumet Avenue. The light plan will be revised to include acorn coach or colonial style fixtures.
I would second that motion.
Counselor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Counselor Tulowitzki.
Yes.
Brian Speck.
Yes.
Rachel Branigan.
Yes. Next, public hearing for PC docket 22-024. OKW Architects on behalf of Simboard Development requesting approval of an amendment to the Lake Business Center Plan Unit Development to include an additional 9,000 square feet of warehouse space at 9200 Calumet Avenue.
Thank you. This is heard in the preliminary hearing last month. The proposal is to construct a 9,000 square foot warehouse connection between the existing south warehouse and the existing north warehouse at the Lake Business Center. In the Lake Business Center planning and development, because it's an increase in the overall building footprint, it requires an amendment to the Lake Business Center PUD ordinance. So it's a fairly simple project. We talked about it last month, but it involves basically building a connection here between these two warehouses so that vehicles can move from one side to the other. The space that's shown in dark in a sort of a shading here is leased by PepsiCo, and the warehouse to the south is leased by Pepsi as well. So they want this link to connect the two warehouses. In addition to that new building, they will reconfigure the parking area within between the buildings here and add these additional loading docks on the west side of the building. There's also an area here that's currently as rubble. It's just kind of construction debris, stones and things like that. They're going to clean that up, seed it with grass seed, and basically install a lawn. At the preliminary hearing, there was some discussion about what that would include, whether or not something more elaborate as far as the landscaping would be installed in that area. We did speak with the architect and applicant after the meeting, and what they're proposing to do now is, in addition to the lawn area, they're proposing to install some shade trees within that area. So it would, in addition to just the lawn and cleaning it up, it'll add some habitat for birds and some shade, and it'll soften the edges of the warehouses. The third or the second change that was made, and actually there's a, let me scroll down here because I think there's a clouded site plan that we can look at. This is sort of the new plan that was included in the staff report. They are changing the base of the warehouse connection. This is the east elevation, so it's facing Calumet Avenue. They changed that at the request of the Plan Commission from stone to brick, which matches the buildings on either side. And then they've also added in existing parking lot or proposed parking lot landscaping to comply with their landscape standards. And they are identifying an area that would be turned into kind of a landscape buffer if and when Maple Leaf Boulevard is constructed to the southwest here. So we kind of went back and forth a little bit with respect to this section and concluded that it would probably be better, given that we don't have the final design on that project, to leave it as just kind of a conceptual or area identified as a buffer and a connection point to that road, just sort of identified in concept, and then that could be made more detailed, come up with a final plan of when the road actually is constructed. So those represent the major changes to the site plan from the preliminary hearing. As I mentioned, it's part of the planning and development, so it would require a recommendation to the town council either to favorably, unfavorably, or no recommendation to approve this planning and development. And tonight it's a public hearing, so.
Thank you, Tom. Are there questions from the board? No, I don't have any questions, but I do appreciate seeing the changes from last meeting. Connection base. Should we open it up to the petitioner?
Yeah, that's the petitioner to come up and
Could the petitioner please come up, state your name?
Hi, good evening. I'm Andy Coglin, principal of OKW Architects, and met with my partner Travis. I think he's been here multiple times over the course of years. It's about the early master planning and the early phases of this some years ago. And Tony Gribble from Simborg is here. I don't really have anything to add unless you have questions specific to the changes that were made between the prelim and.
I don't have questions. It looks like what was brought up last time has been addressed, so appreciate that. Good.
That makes sense. Let's go ahead and open it to the public hearing. Any comments online?
Nothing online. I think these are all other.
Okay. All right, well then, we will close the public hearing portion of the meeting and we'll to someone make a motion.
Madam Chair. I would move to forward a favorable recommendation to the Munster Town Council for PC docket number 22-024 to amend the Lake Business Center Plan Unit building to include a 9,000 square feet of warehouse space at 9200 Calumet Avenue, with the condition that the final development plan be approved by the Munster Planning Commission.
Second.
Thank you.
Call the roll.
Oh, roll call.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki.
Yes.
Brian Specht.
Yes.
Rachel Brannigan.
Yes. Thank you. On to PC docket 23-002, Body Layouts, requesting approval of development plan for a medical office building at 545th Street. Do you walk us through this, please?
I will. I'll be finding a good image to speak of. That's pretty good. So the applicant is requesting approval of the development plan for a medical office building at 505th Street. The owner of the building is proposing to modify this existing light industrial building, which is formerly the home of Minor Electronics, which is kind of like a communications technology company, into a, as I said, a medical office that he plans to use for his own practice. The property currently contains an 8,000 square foot building, 150 foot tall communications tower, and an existing parking lot. They have already successfully petitioned for the building or the lot to be rezoned from industrial use to CD4B use, and they've also obtained parking variance in order to install some additional parking in the front of the building. So this site plan shown here represents the proposal for the site. As you can see, maybe a different image would show you the changes a little better, but what they're hoping to do is this is kind of the existing site here. But they're hoping to remove this curb cut on 45th Street, open up a new cut here on Kennedy Court, expand the parking lot to the east to allow for 2 rows of parking on the east side of the building, and then stripe in new parking spaces then on the south side, which is the front of the building, and north side, which is the rear of the building, and then implement a new landscaping and lighting plan. Install a new dumpster enclosure in the rear of the building. So you can see kind of the difference of what they're hoping to do. In addition to the site upgrades, they are proposing to refresh, let's say, of the building itself. I'm able to find a good picture. I'm sorry, bear with me a second. I'm trying to get a picture of the building from the front. I don't know why it's not wanting to. There we go. All right, so apologies for that. So basically, they're not gonna touch the facade that much, but what they're proposing to do is basically replace this kind of, there's like a brown metal paneling along the top of the building. The building is brown brick, so they plan to replace that brown paneling with some kind of like a wood grain metal, paint the brick white, add some additional windows and doors, and then close off the existing overhead doors. All of those revisions that they're proposing, or those improvements, are all compliant with our standards. Again, this is a situation where it's not a brand new building, so we permit modifications to the extent that the modifications comply with our standards. So in this case, they do, as I mentioned, they're putting constructing a new brick dumpster enclosure in the building. Their landscaping is compliant with our standards. They are providing, as I mentioned, that they're closing off the curb cut on 45th Street. Okay, so as I said, they're closing off this curb cut, but they are adding a new sidewalk along 45th Street and along Kennedy Court with direct sidewalk connections between the front door and those street sidewalks. Something we always encourage people to do. They are providing a compliant lighting plan with the required ornamental fixtures. And, yeah, that's essentially it. This is a public hearing, and staff would recommend approval of the development plan as presented.
Any questions from any comments?
We'd seen the similar proposal at the time of the redistricting and appreciated the use and the changes. That's all I have no questions.
I had a question about the light fixtures that were, are those what are required from our standards? It was when I was able to scroll through earlier, they looked,
Yeah, so
well, there was more of a
Being about
sketchy.
these.
Yes, I was just thinking if that's what we're requiring, that's fine. They just seemed a little more ornamental building looks, the building was a little more modern.
the way that our ordinance reads is it says that you are required to have either Coach, Acorn, or colonial fixtures. And we've, in the past, really always kind of interpreted that pretty liberally in the sense that, I don't know if you recall, the development was the Smoothie King. They have a more modern looking, it's almost like a post type of light rather than a standard overhead type of light. So we do permit other things besides the very ornamental styles. I don't know if maybe the architect can speak to why they chose that particular one. They may have needed to meet our illumination standard, and that's why they chose that. I don't know, or maybe they only liked it. I just don't know.
Okay.
But there's a range of different actual, we have a general style. There's a range of different models that could meet that standard.
Maybe a tangential comment, but if, for example, Smoothie King's more modern style is something that meets the future image of the town. And it's probably not an illusion of our sort of we may want to look at including such a style in the zoning code as well.
Yeah, I can't remember if I sent you the. You sent them that spreadsheet, I think, so. That would have been permitted at this location too.
So I would imagine if you'd like a different, more modern style of lighting and you just chosen this because those were the menu of options at the time, that probably wouldn't receive much pushback if you wanted to do something that fit the building.
We would prefer to go the more modern route, and this was, sorry.
Please come up, state your name and your address for the record.
Sorry, I don't have. I'm Amr Sicilla, Director of AV Services at the HOH Group located in Schaumburg, Illinois. And pretty much to answer the question about the light choice, that's just simply because we just wanted to comply with the requirements. And of course, finding at the same time, not having to use too many light fixtures, trying to meet the minimal photometrics requirements as well for the site. So that was the route that we went. We kind of already answered that question when it was asked, but just kind of reinforcing the answer given by Tom.
So would there be a more modern fixture that would fit the bill for this view as possible?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe you would make that change.
Yeah, so we'll make that change and of course run it by the planning commission just to make sure that we're in that compliance. So just to, it's one of those that reaffirm our selection.
I am a patient of Dr. Leos. I feel like every time I drive into that parking lot, it's front of me. So that's my personal opinion.
Totally understood.
And I don't know that you need to come back to planning commission or rather just work with staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can coordinate that.
So we'll make sure we work that into that motion.
Okay. I don't see anyone else here for public hearing, but if there's anyone online.
Only Brian left. Yeah.
All right. So open and close the public hearing portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anything else you want to share with them?
Just a quick correction for just the public. I guess the dumpster, I think we actually changed that from the brick. I just wanted to just from the brick to the fabric gate in the back, just simply because we relocated the dumpster. I just wanted to let you know about the dumpster closure was actually not brick. But I don't know if that's gonna cause any issues or not.
Well, it is supposed to be correct. Yeah.
So it's supposed to be brick. So we can make, we'll make that change as well. So yeah, just so.
I have one other question. The 150-foot tall communications tower, is that removed? Is it going to be removed?
We would love to remove it. The issue is that we don't own it. So that's where it gets a little nuanced. That's something that has to be worked out between the owner and the owner of the new property and the owner of the tower, so that's out of our scope. But it's, ideally, and of course, several unanimously, we want to remove that tower.
Is it functional? Is it operational?
I believe it is. And if you can take a look at the survey, but the survey, you'll see that there are easements on this lot that are provided for this tower. So yeah, they do have a certain ownership interest in the property. And I don't know what conversations you have had with the owner, but my sense is that just given how rare, how few locations there are now to put a tower in, that it's not going to be.
I was just under the assumption that it was not functional. That was a false assumption. Will you be also repaving last time I went to the animal shelter, there's a huge pothole, I think, in that, the southernmost drive, the existing drive. Will you be repaving the parking lot as you're doing some additions?
Yeah.
And the landscape?
So the entire parking lot will be repaved.
We need to pave all of 45th Street to get there.
Also in the works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a motion to,
Madam Chairperson, I move to approve PC docket 23002, granting approval of a development plan for a medical office building at 500 45th Street upon the condition that the landscaping plan be revised to include the required street trees along 45th Street and Kennedy Court, and that the applicant work with staff to find the suitable lighting application, which may vary from the three required activities.
Second.
Councilor Kulturitis.
Yes.
Councilor Tulowitzki.
Yes.
Brian Specht.
Yes.
And Richard Brand.
yeah,
Thank you.
so it looks like we don't have anything on findings of fact. Any other business items for discussion tonight? Okay, our next regularly scheduled meeting is March 14th, 2020.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Second.
Thank you.
In favor?
Aye.
I
Great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Did
for
a
helping me
great
along.
job. See,
0-1.
I know.
We can go through it all the time.
You know, if I would have known about it,